Hello and welcome to the Inside Risk and Compliance podcast. I'm your host, Adam Spencer, Director of AJ Fox Compliance, a specialist recruitment agency focusing on all things law firm risk and compliance. I have seen so many people carve amazing and fulfilling careers in this space, and it really has been a pleasure speaking to people who enjoy doing what they do every day. However, one thing that has really stood out to me is how hard it can be for people to access the bigger picture outside of their team, outside of their firm. We created this podcast to share with you some of the insights, experiences and stories of the most interesting people succeeding inside risk and compliance. In this episode, we talk to Alexandra Iliff, Head of Legal Practice at Shakespeare Martineau and Group Legal Compliance Officer across AMPA Group, about navigating risk and compliance in complex, multidisciplinary legal businesses. Alexandra shares her career journey from litigation to regulatory work at the SRA and ultimately into senior in-house compliance roles, where she now oversees risk across a wide group of law firm and non-legal entities. We explore what it means to lead compliance across brands, manage competing regulatory regimes, and preserve independence in a role that often requires difficult decisions and firm boundaries. Whether you're just starting out or building towards a leadership role, Alexandra offers clear advice on getting a foothold in compliance, building trust with stakeholders, and recognising that in this career, the work is never really done. Enjoy. So, Alexandra, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very, very good. Thanks, Adam.
Good. Well, it's great to have you here. So, for the benefit of our listeners, can you just very briefly tell us who you are and what you're doing at the moment, and then we'll dive into your journey to get to that point.
Absolutely. So I'm Alexandra Iliff, and I'm currently COLP, that's Compliance Officer for Legal Practice, and GLCO, that's Group Legal Compliance Officer, at Shakespeare Martineau and AMPA Group, respectively.
Okay, so not a straightforward one. Okay, but that's you've not always worked in risk and compliance, right? So you previously worked in litigation, as I understand it.
That's right. So I qualified as a solicitor quite some years ago. In fact, I did the conversion course and the Law Society finals, so that dates me a little bit. I did a training contract in a law firm in Lincoln's Inn, actually.
Okay.
And then on qualification, I moved up to Birmingham for personal reasons and worked for a big national law firm, so really quite different.
Yes.
And qualified into commercial litigation.
Okay, and how was that? How long did you do that for?
12 years, I think it was.
Okay.
Not counting. I think it was about 12 years.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of change within that business during that time, and I worked up to being senior associate. And worked on some really interesting cases, and had 3 children during that time. Yeah. Not quite sure how I managed it now, looking back.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe it's not so much the case these days, but certainly in the past there was quite a steady flow, I guess, of people moving from litigation into risk and compliance for whatever reason. So how did you find your way from litigation to the world of risk and compliance?
Yeah, well, looking back on it, in the commercial litigation role, I was working in the education sector for a time. And so I was working on drafting policies, enforcing policies, investigations, that kind of thing. So that was a fit already, but I hadn't thought of going to work for the Law Society as it then was. Then I had quite a lengthy career break, lots of time to think, and a 4th child. And then there came a time when I really needed to get back to work. So then I ended up with the SRA. So I was in the supervision team as it then was. And
was that something had you thought previously that you might head towards the SRA? How did that even happen? How did that come about?
No, I hadn't thought about it at all. I think I remembered in the course of my work visiting the Law Society, but things had changed massively over the period of time when I wasn't working, and then I was looking for something suitable. I had the 4 young kids and a dog by that stage, and so I needed to have something with manageable hours, put it that way. And I was really fortunate because I was in central Birmingham, a walk away from the Cube, where the SRA is based. And so it worked really, really well for me, and I stayed with the SRA for around 7 years.
And what was that transition like then? Was the role that you started in, was it as you expected it to be as when you arrived, or was it?
Gosh, I just had no real expectations. I knew that it was looking at it was the handbook in those days, the 2011 handbook, and helping firms to comply with the handbook.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was an investigations element, communication with firms element.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't. Hadn't experienced that regime because I hadn't been in work at that point when it came in. But I had really good training. Everyone had very extensive training when I got there. I remember I couldn't even use the printer because the whole machinery had changed in the years I've been off. But yeah, I did quite a few different roles. So I started off in the supervision role, which was quite a consultative role, ringing up firms and asking them about how they complied and making suggestions for future compliance, that kind of thing.
Did they like getting your telephone calls?
Not particularly. I don't think we ever had that warm a reception, but we were actually trying to be constructive.
Yeah.
But there was an investigations element, of course, and there were quite a few changes in the way that investigations were managed and who by and so forth. So the role really developed. But then I went to specialise in the interventions team for a period of time. And then, because I'm a solicitor, I was able to move into the legal department. Yep. So working on cases that were referred to the tribunal. And then I moved back into supervision because I realised actually that was what I really enjoyed, was the stories and understanding what motivated people and that kind of thing, really. Yeah.
And how did that progress then? And was there a point at which you started thinking, do you know what, I'm quite interested in doing this on the other side of the fence? And
it had progressed. The roles really progressed a lot in the period that I was there, and then I suppose the teams became much more thematic based, and ultimately that led to the AML team being set up, of course. So you were looking at cases more of a type rather than having a generalist kind of portfolio of investigations. It was interesting, but I just felt that I wanted to do something different and do something broader, really, in the end of the day.
And that is the point at which you decided to make the move into a law firm? That's right, yeah. Okay, so how did that come about?
Actually, I think LinkedIn was helpful in that, but I had the idea that I wanted to look more broadly and thought about what that could be. It wouldn't necessarily have been in a law firm, but in a sort of compliance role. And then I had an opportunity, which was a really good one. And so I moved into a law-led professional services business. So that was much broader. So it wasn't just a solicitor's firm. There were other entities within the group. And so the risk and compliance role was much broader than I would have expected.
I was going to say, so how was that transition then? How did it, because you'd obviously worked in private practice, then you've worked in the SRA, and now you're working in-house in what is more than just a law firm, I guess. How did, again, same question, was that as you expected it to be, or was that even broader, and were there challenges you hadn't anticipated?
There were definitely challenges that I hadn't anticipated, but all of them were good challenges. It's a question of going back to the basics and understanding exactly, how the business was made up, what the business was trying to achieve, were the foundations there correct, reviewing all of the regulatory side to make sure that all the relevant approvals and authorisations were in place. And then having to be really flexible and agile about, if you're in a law-led business, obviously the SRA regulation side is a really big thing, but it doesn't apply to everyone. But you've got to make things consistent to an extent, and it has to work for everybody and has to protect everybody. So that's when you need to look at having different levels of compliance and having really agile systems and processes.
And I understand that, it's interesting. On the one hand, there are SRA regs that don't apply to everybody. Am I right in thinking there were other regs that, non-SRA regs that applied to one group of people and not another? Because there's parts of that business, it was Gately, right? Part of that business that was RICS accredited, right? So was that something that fell under in your world?
Yeah, that was true, but the SRA regulation is a much bigger piece, as would have been FCA, but we Gately didn't have FCA. So you need to take account of different pressures and different motivations and different requirements, definitely. And if you have an overseas law firm, again, a different requirement too. So, yeah, it was about scaling things across different types of business and making it work for different types and trying to make it as consistent as it could be.
Yeah. And how did you go about that then? What was your sort of practical approach? If there's somebody else listening who finds themselves in a multidisciplinary business that's maybe legal-led, have you got advice you would give them?
Yeah, I think as a starting point, and you can reach a different endpoint, but I think the starting point is to make sure you've got the foundations right. So ideally, everyone doing the same thing. So possibly saying, right, we're going to assume that SRA rules apply across the board to protect our business and make sure we're doing everything as safely as we can.
Yeah.
But once you've ingrained that compliance and understanding, then you can start departing from that and having a multi-tiered approach.
Yeah. So would that be looking on a case-by-case basis at new pieces of work and thinking, is this an opportunity where we can step underneath the regs because they don't actually apply and it is low risk and it's worth it for the business? Or?
Yeah, that's so. There's to try and carve out areas where you can apply lower level of checks, for example, or or not apply a particular control that you might have. Yeah. But looking at it in rather than a case by case basis, ideally looking at it in a block so that you can do it efficiently.
Yeah. Well, that sounds not straightforward.
I just wanted to take a moment out to thank our amazing sponsor, the International Compliance Association. The ICA are the leading professional body for the global regulatory and financial crime community, offering professional qualifications, world-class events and training. Go check them out online, and if any of the certificates or courses take your fancy, then you can get 10% discount using our code AJFOX10 at checkout.
And then you've moved to a new business that you're with at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit about them, what they do? Because again, not a straightforward law firm.
So again, a really interesting business because AMPA is a house of brands.
Yes.
There are law firm entities and also non-law entities. So there's a cyber and security business and a business advice service as well. And then we also have an affiliated Scottish entity. So a very broad network of brands.
Yep.
And within our legal entity, we have quite a number of different brands and the brands are maintained within what we offer. They're all very different to each other, and that's encouraged so that they can grow as themselves. They're not required to be merged into a single brand.
Right.
But yet we manage them in terms of central services from within our AMPA entity.
And how is that? That must be super challenging, managing different brands. That I think we were talking before about the fact that the business takes an approach of trying to look for other businesses that share a similar culture, right? But they're still separate businesses at some point. Joining the brand, that must be a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, as any firm will find, when you do lateral hires or you acquire a business, you've got to make sure you've got that culture piece right in the first place. So there's the possibility of integration in a good way, but then also you've actually got to do the practical integration. And that is challenging, especially with another law firm where they'll have a whole raft of policies and controls, and you need to homogenise them. Yeah. Across the brands.
And do you enjoy the challenge of it not being a straightforward law firm?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I don't think I'd enjoy it if I didn't have a good team behind me, though. That's absolutely essential, yeah. So there's an increasing amount. And it's one of those roles where the more you do, the more you have to do. So, the more conversations you have, the more you realise you've got to pick up and the more you can do things better. Yeah,
and because of the fact that the business has got not just law firms within it, do you find there's a difference in terms of securing buy-in to compliance from non-legal professionals?
Yeah, that is true, and and it's something we haven't completely resolved yet, and we are working to resolve to reduce the burden on non-regulated entities and brands, whilst maintaining it in our regulated. But we need to get that balance right because we need the efficiency of the process and the clarity of the process before we can reduce the levels of checks that we're doing in the non-regulated parts.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know one of the things we were talking about before we started the recording was obviously you hold a COLP role, and I think until recently that was at 2 businesses at the same time.
Yes, that's right.
So how did that work? Was that...
the first challenge was to get approved by the SRA for both, and actually I hadn't been a COLP before, so that involved being able to show them that I was able to do the role. There were separate businesses. Now they're one. In fact, there's just the same number of people, and really the same. They're different offerings, different client base, and different locations. We have over 20 locations in the UK. So, so it hasn't really reduced anything. But I suppose it's that simplicity which we're striving for. We know we have quite a simple proposition, House of Brands. And then we need to bring that into reality and make it work as efficiently as we can. And
did you have to jump through hoops to be allowed to be COLP at 2? I'm not familiar with how it works, but my understanding previously, probably totally wrong, was that you had to be employed by the business that you're a COLP of, right?
Right? You don't have to be. In fact, you can be an outsourced COLP.
Fantastic. Okay.
But yeah, certainly I had to answer some due diligence questions, as you'd expect, and I had to satisfy them that I had the capacity to do the role and the support.
Okay, and another thing we were talking about was the fact that we see a lot of firms where the COLP is a partner, maybe it is a fee earner, but you feel the real benefits of not being a member at the firm and holding that title that gives you a bit of independence. Can you sort of expand on that a little bit?
I'm a very firm believer in that, because if you're part of the membership of a business, then you've got that stake in it. Whereas as COLP, it's quite a lonely role. You have to make decisions, and sometimes they're not popular decisions. You have to, in the end of the day, comply with reporting obligations, which are quite onerous, and it may not seem to be immediately in the business's interest or an individual's interest to make that report. So there's already quite a lot of, I would make a decision and then I would explain why I've made that decision. But I think it would be more difficult if I were a member to have that independence and, effectively hurt myself in the pocket, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we always talk on this podcast about how to secure that buy-in from senior leadership and how to have those difficult conversations. And I noted in one of the previous communications we'd had that one of the things you said was really important to, be effective in a risk and compliance career is to not underestimate the value of all the touch points with all your stakeholders. I'd be really interested to hear a bit more about that, because I'm sure there are people listening who could get, value from thinking about themselves making more out of all the touch points they have with all their stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I think every conversation you have, you learn something that's important in, maybe in your COLP role, maybe in a more in the GLCO role, or for the team generally. It's building that understanding. The business that I work in has been operating well before I joined. It's really important to understand how it came about, all the historical changes that have happened, how it was built up, what entities have been brought into the business, how they were inducted, why, all of that. And so in my business, there are a lot of people that have been there for years, and so that's really useful. And I have a conversation with those people, say, oh yeah, so you worked in that firm that we acquired. Tell me, how did it happen? What were the consequences, etc. And then it's building up that complete picture of the firm that's really important, and finding if there are areas of weakness, making sure we've identified those and we're tracking them and we're doing something about them.
And how do you bring new recruits, I guess, up to speed with that? Because that sounds so important to have that historical knowledge of the business, but also quite a hard thing for somebody to pick up if they're
luckily we have somebody who's been with the business for, I think it's about 28 years.
Oh wow, fantastic.
And so she is brilliant, but a lot of history, and she's documented all of that for us. So, we're able to delve back into 2010, what the structure was, and sometimes that's necessary. You get historic issues raised, and you need to be able to address and explain them.
Yeah, that's amazing. So it's actually documented somewhere on an intranet or something. Some people can.
We keep really careful records. Not without pain.
But it's worth it. No, that sounds fantastic. Another thing I know you mentioned before was we talked about the sort of myths that people have around risk and compliance, and a couple of them that I just wanted to pick up on where you mentioned that it's not easy. I think some people maybe have the misconception that it's a straightforward career path, it's a straightforward space, and also that it's not binary. It's never, it's not as simple as yes or no, computer says yes. Again, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think your job is never over, ever. There's always somebody you need to get back to, or an improvement you want to address, or, policy you want to review. So, we do try to take the time to kind of look back over the past quarter and think of all the things we've achieved, and kind of feel good about that before we plunge into the next thing. But it can be quite relentless. You can't take your eye off the ball. We always make sure that we have one of the senior members of the team at work at one time.
I'm just picking up on that point. I really like what you said there about every quarter you look back on what you've achieved. So do you put a bulletin out there, or is it just as a team you think about what you've achieved?
Yeah, as AMPA Group Services, we are messaging to the business about improvements that we've made, how we've supported our fee earning contingent, how we're continuing to make improvements, because we have to show them, demonstrate value to them. And also show them what's around the corner, so people don't get shock. Because it's always important to recognise how even what we might think of as quite small changes seem quite significant to people who are doing the day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. I'm sure other firms are doing it. I haven't heard many people talk about that. But even in our own business, we're always looking at where can we give more visibility of what. We're a very, very small business. We've got a couple of people working on the ops side, and maybe they don't see the visibility of what other people are doing, and vice versa. And for us, it's as simple as a couple of Slack channels where stuff is communicated about the same sort of thing, that improvements that people have made, or how one thing has led to another. I think it's so important because it can get completely missed, right? And I don't often hear risk and compliance professionals talking about celebrating the wins.
Yeah, well, that's what we do at AMPA Group Services. We definitely do. But we're a very large brand in itself almost. It's not an external facing brand, but we have our people team and our IT team and information security, and all of us work together, and we have large projects, managed projects, and we'll tend to work on those projects together because there'll be implications right across the piece.
Yeah, no, it sounds really exciting. Well, look, that's been super interesting. I was just going to finish by asking you, if we've got people listening, I guess two questions, right? If we've got people listening who are thinking, do you know what, they might be quite excited about working in a business that's not a straightforward law firm, that is multiple disciplines or multiple businesses, what would you say to them about whether they should go for it? And then I guess the follow-up question is, just for anybody looking to get into this space or progress themselves within risk and compliance, is there any advice, from the top, you're now sort of right at the top of the chain, that you could pass on to those people trying to carve a career path in this space?
Yeah, I think with a business like mine, what's really exciting is opening your eyes to risk generally, because it's not just regulatory risk that we're handling on our team, it's enterprise risk. So, we're managing risk registers right across the piece, right across the business, and making sure that those are managed appropriately. So, that's really exciting when, to realise that, regulatory risk, really important, but that's a microcosm of risk. And we're really trying to focus on leveraging risk and helping to improve the way we operate our business with risk in mind. And then for people who want to get into risk and compliance, I suppose it's maybe I would always think about going into a CMI role initially, because that's always going to be really useful experience. It's very structured training, and there's usually quite a good career development program around that in many firms anyway. And then from that, you're going to be able to develop into a wider risks piece, because you're
Yeah.
going to have developed the skills and expertise that you need.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice, and I think a lot of the firms that have business acceptance teams have obviously been doing, risk and compliance, investing in it for a long time. So the training platform's there, and you won't be the first person they're training. So yeah, I think that's really good advice. Well, look, Alexandra, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on the podcast. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
We really hope you enjoyed listening to today's podcast as much as we enjoyed recording it. If you did, please do us a huge favour and share it with a friend or a colleague. The more people we can get listening, the more time and energy we can get into recording more episodes and getting the best guests and the most interesting stories and insights. I want to say a huge thank you to the ICA for their support, to Ty and Karem here in the studio, and a massive thanks to Kat for making sure everything runs so smoothly behind the scenes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on LinkedIn to make sure you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.